and welcome to the Design to Thrive podcast for young people. I'm Caroline Brewer and this is my son Jack. So we have or are doing this podcast series to support wellbeing for young people. This is our third so far in the series. The first one was talking about overwhelm, feelings of overwhelm, and how that is linked to our overthinking. The second one was about trusting our inner spark, that energy which is flowing through all of us, which comes before we get caught up in our busy thinking. This podcast is going to be about ego. And that is the personal thinking that we identify with as being who we are, and how indeed that's at the root of all of our unhappiness and our lack of well-being, our lack of seeing who we really are is that inner spark. So Jack, I wonder if you could share with the audience how you have come to recognize ego within yourself.
Yeah, so the clearest examples for me was when I was younger, and as I grew up, I put on quite a bit of weight from overeating because it was fun and enjoyable to eat, and I kept eating, and then people called me fat, and I self-actualized with the fact that people were calling me fat. And so I said I'm a fat person. And that made me feel unhappy and distressed. And I didn't like the fact that I was fat. But then to counteract the fact that I felt unhappy about the fact that I was fat, I'd eat more. Because I still am a comfort eater. When I want to feel comfortable, I eat to feel comfortable. So the fact that people were calling me fat made me feel uncomfortable, and I would eat to overcome it. And then I'd get fatter, and then more people would call me fat, and I'd call myself fat. And it was this whole thing that I didn't realise I was really doing. It was all happening subconsciously. I didn't have conscious thought about the fact that the reason I was eating more was because of the fact that I felt unhappy. I was just eating more because it was the natural thing for me to do. And when I got older and I started being more engrossed in 3Ps, and I started to realise, I started to consciously think about why I was doing certain things, I realised that actually it was the ego trying to defend itself that was making me feel so unhappy with that identity. My ego was holding on to the fact that I was a fat person. But in actual fact, I wasn't a fat person. And it didn't define me at all. And it helped to consciously think about why I was making certain decisions. Why was I eating so much? And I realised I was eating so much because it made me feel comfortable. And then I sort of said, okay, why do I feel uncomfortable? And it was because my ego was telling me I was fat. But I suddenly realised that actually I didn't have to identify with that, and I could make improvements to my lifestyle and still feel comfortable in the body that I was in. Like, this is my body, I can feel comfortable with it. I don't have to try and change it to match someone else's standards. I just need to meet my own, and my own is being healthy. So to achieve that, I just started to eat less, and I started to exercise more.
Okay, let's just rewind, because there was an awful lot in an awful lot in that, and I think the first thing to notice was that there was an awful lot of thinking.
Yes, so much thinking.
And so I think what I heard you say, if I can unpack that, is that there'd been a lot of thinking about it, but it was until you were aware of it, it was all unconscious. But it was that thinking that, if you like, that unhelpful thinking that you weren't aware of, that was driving your behaviour
Yeah.
to eat more
Yeah.
and to comfort eat, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
something that a lot of us can identify with. We live in a society where the opportunity for lovely comfort eating foods is just shouting out from the shelves. So it's very easy to slip into that. And of course, other people who are listening may be able to identify with other unhealthy or unhelpful behaviours that they are doing. So what you're saying is that it was sort of unconscious and it was habitual.
Yeah.
And it was just a cycle that was that was driving you on in the belief that you would be happier.
Yeah, exactly.
And what you've noticed is that was a personal thinking that we are terming sort of part of the ego.
Yeah.
So that was the voice inside your head that was saying, eat more.
Yeah, I think the a really big thing that I started to understand was that these expectations I was setting for myself were all inside my own head. And I started to realize that the only way I could achieve those expectations was in my own head. And so no matter what I did outside, no matter how fit I got, no matter how thin I got, I was never matching my mental image because it was a mental image, not a realistic one. And I think that's part of the ego too, is it's creating this image of yourself and pretending that it's real.
And where do you think you pick those expectations up from?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
You generate, we were talking last week about sort of the inner spark leading you back in the right direction, and how other people chiming in and giving their advice can feel overwhelming and could muddy the waters. It's similar for the ego, where the ego just picks up everything that's thrown at it. One offhanded comment can be something that the ego latches onto and holds onto for the rest of your life. One person saying, "Oh, you're a bit stressy, aren't you?" can cause your ego to identify as a stressy person, and then you hold on to that. Can be something you hold on to, and then your ego is looking for ways to affirm itself in everything that you do. So every time you have a stressful moment, it's like, oh, it's because you're a stressy person, and it affirms
I must be therefore a stressy person. And I think the thing that we want to point out is that the person who might have said that in the first place, that wasn't, that was just perhaps a throwaway comment, or that was being driven by their own ego at that moment, and that in no way there's any sort of truth in that, but unconsciously you've picked up on that, and then over time have made that, well, therefore I must be a stressy person, or an overweight person, or whatever.
The most obvious in my own life of that situation was with my sibling, and her saying that I was an annoying brother.
Yeah.
And me latching on to the fact, my ego latching on to the fact that I must be an annoying person because my sister had told me one time that I was annoying. And it became like a competition to see if I could be the most annoying person I could be. So she would come home and say, "Oh, this person was annoying me." And I would be like, "Oh, I bet it wasn't as annoying as me." And that it became part of my personality. I tried to be an annoying person. My ego latched onto it and said, "Oh, you're an annoying person. Like, keep going. Like, keep being an annoying person." And when I realised it,
just before you go on, let's just be clear. You didn't know.
No,
this was unconscious.
Yeah, this was all unconscious. But I brought it into the conscious realm by thinking about my decisions. Like, why was I deciding to fire a Nerf gun at my sister, for instance? And I realised that I was doing those things because my ego was saying you're an annoying person and trying to defend itself, trying to build that image up more and more, create more evidence for itself to latch onto.
And sorry, let's just be really, really clear about this, because that is what the ego does. And through no, we're not saying that it's good or bad, no judgment, but the ego, because it actually doesn't exist, it's just our own personal thoughts. It really does have to make itself heard and give itself an identity. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. So even though people might be listening to this going, what, in terms of that, we can be talking so actively about the ego doing something which is actually totally unhelpful to you, almost, you could say, the host of the ego.
And it is also important to note that the ego can help us. It can produce. I think the general thing is that the ego presents habitual patterns that you, as an individual, fall into. So it will present a pattern of unhealthy eating, or it will present a pattern of exercise. Obviously, one of those can be seen as healthy and useful, and one of them can be seen as unhelpful and unuseful. Obviously, there's an extreme to both cases where if you're over-exercising, it can be detrimental. Mm-hmm. But bringing it into the conscious thought rather than letting it be a subconscious response, you can begin to decide and analyze your habitual natures and which ones you want to hold on to. Because if you do find your routine has exercise in it, a healthy amount of exercise, it's good to hold on to that routine.
Yes.
But if you notice and you bring to the forefront the fact that you're overeating, it might be good to reduce the amount you eat and consciously make an effort to break that habitual nature.
Mm. Yeah, so the key thing that we're pointing out is that it's about who, it's about being human. It's part of being human. It's our own sort of personal thinking system, habitual thinking system that we have identified with as being who we are, but that's just because it's there so often and gets repeated so often, and we're just saying that taking it from it being unconscious into it being conscious, and us being able to say, is that helpful and healthy? Do I want to continue that, or do I want to begin to lessen its hold on me?
Yeah,
that's what's really helpful.
And an important thing to notice is sometimes that if you're trying to get rid of the habit, sometimes it can be healthy to indulge it once in a while.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can sort of analyze the fact that you're maybe binge watching too many TV shows or something like that, and thus start to reduce it. But that doesn't mean you should never ever binge watch a TV show ever again.
No. Or
you should never eat a really nice cake ever again, in the sense that I used to overeat and still occasionally do. You don't have to completely cut it out of your life immediately. It's useful to notice its existence.
Yes.
So you can start to make conscious decisions based
Absolutely.
upon it. So in the context of me identifying as an annoying person, I could see the habitual nature being like, oh yeah, shoot her with a Nerf gun. I could notice that that's what my ego was telling me to do. And I could go, no, I don't want to do that. And I could, with that specifically, with the annoying one, it was much easier than with the overeating one.
Right. Right.
And that might be the case for other people as well. They might find certain things are far, far easier to break out of the habit of than others. But it is possible to break out of every habit.
Yeah.
you are in control. That is like a key part, is you are in control of your choices, and you can make, as hard as it might seem, you can always start to work to achieve the goals you want to.
And it's all about bringing it into your conscious awareness. That's the bit that we're saying that really makes the difference.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've said that it's if you like, a normal human part of the human condition that we pick up wrongly or erroneously or whatever. We pick up these messages and we take them inside, and they become part of our thinking, and we then start to identify with those as, well, that's who I am. So I must be an annoying person. This is in your case. I must be an overweight person. That's part of my personality. There's nothing I can do about that. That's just who I am. And what we're saying is, no, that's just thinking that you have picked up, and your ego is working to make that part of the identity. And we're saying that by bringing that into consciousness, you can start to break that down. So the real acid question here is, if you're not those things that you have picked up along the way and said a part of you, if you're recognizing that you're not that, who are you?
Well, I think that's a very interesting and very complicated question.
Yeah.
Because personally, my sense of self doesn't have a form. Now that I've understood that the ego isn't me, it's just something that exists and can be acknowledged and respected, but it does not define who I am. When I realized that, my sense of self became very amorphous. It didn't have a distinct picture. I just realized that I wanted to put out what I wanted to see and I wanted to feel. So I wanted to feel happy, I wanted to feel safe, and I wanted to feel respected. So my sense of self became, how can I make other people and the area around me reflect that? And so my sense of self is sort of defined in the moment by what I decide is the best way to achieve those goals. So at a specific moment, I might define myself as a friend or as a son, and I have all these different definitions that can become part of me and can be used and other people can see, but it's so amorphous. It changes all the time. Sometimes I need to be more caring, sometimes I need to be more loving, sometimes I just need to be an ear, and I need no other features other than my ears to achieve the goals that I want to achieve. And that's my sense of self in that moment. It changes every single minute of every single day. And I think that was a big relief for me to realize that I wasn't nailed down to being one specific person. I didn't have to be labeled.
You don't have to live up to that label then. I mean, the freedom to respond and create whatever you want to happen in the world is immense freedom, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think another thing, just to sort of go back to the ego, is if someone says to you, you're an amazing friend, and your ego latches onto that, and you define yourself by being an amazing friend, every time you slip on that, you can hurt yourself and create like negative thinking. But in actual fact, sometimes you won't be the perfect friend, and that is okay. Because you aren't defined by being a perfect friend. You are defined by being you, and that changes. And it's okay to allow that to change and be whatever you think is necessary at the time.
Yeah. That's lovely. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think, there are times if someone says to you, you've been an amazing friend, then I think that's lovely for you for you and, your ego to go, ooh, I'm an amazing friend in this moment. And that's, you can celebrate that in this moment, and then you can let it go. And as you say, it doesn't then have to define what you have to do in future. So, I think that's lovely to recognise that we can still celebrate compliments or success, outward success, but we're saying when we're doing it consciously, we can let it go and move on to the next.
We don't have to always be chasing that
yeah.
accomplishment.
And that is so liberating. I think that's the that's the key. And as you were talking there, it reminded me of my favourite quote, which is Gandhi's "Be the change you want to see in the world." And that's what you've described. Being aware of the role of ego has opened up for you, is that you can be that change, because in any moment you can be who you need to be. Okay, well, I hope that has been helpful. I think just to summarize, we're saying that ego is not real. It happens. It exists only in our thinking, and the more conscious we are of the role, the less we get gripped by that ego and driven to behave in ways which can be detrimental to us, which seems crazy, but that's where it's coming from. It's coming from inside of us, and that by bringing that into conscious awareness, then we have the freedom to be who we want to be in the moment. Again, we would love to have some feedback. We'd love to have your comments. Use the comments section in YouTube. Contact us by email. Message us in any way that you can to give us some feedback, or ask us to discuss something that might be relevant to you. And thank you very much, Jack. And we'll be having another conversation next week in our Design to Thrive podcast for young people.